I have been part of this building for some 40 years. That's a little bit more than 10% of the entire life of this building, which is now a little bit over 300 years. And the building came into use as a non-residence in 1923. So this actually hasn't been a residence of anybody, nor the house across the street, for about 100 years. And during most of that period, really, other than storing things, very few people came here during the 30s, 40s, and 50s, 60s, and 70s. And sometimes it was closed for 10 years at a time. It was sort of in mothballs. And now the two buildings are being used extensively, not as a museum, but for other activities, mainly environmental issues and various student activities. And so the building has changed use. I think people sometimes get disappointed that we're not a museum, but we have no intention of being a museum. The artifacts can go somewhere else. What we want is action to take place. Now, truthfully, this building in the middle of winter does not get used that much, but we can make individual rooms heated, and so it does get some use in the winter months, but you might say our temperature is now authentic. It's the same as it was in the 1700s in this building. These buildings are in excellent conditions for colonial buildings, and over the last decade, we have added a memorial arboretum in the back, and that is focusing on many, many trees that are all suitable to the urban environment. And we do hope that more people in Elizabeth who consider planting trees will look at the wide variety and they can tell from the shapes. I do have pictures of some locations in Elizabeth from the 1920s, and the trees planted in the 1920s now are big, full-grown, whatever they are. Some are appropriate and some are not. So you have to be careful what you plant so that it's appropriate to where it is. Today's program featuring the Hispanic diaspora in our city, and after this, the Four Centuries tours. This is exactly how we wanted these buildings to be used. So we've now, which year is this? 15 years for our forums and that kind of thing? Is this 15, 16 years somewhere? And so we've created a record of what we've done for video, and every now and then you get a question that refers back to something that happened 10, 20, 30 years ago, and wouldn't you know it, we've had a program on it. We've gone through all the neighborhoods in Elizabeth, and we have extensive interviews with hundreds of people who, many of whom are now no longer with us, but their memories of what Elizabeth was like at the turn of the century and before are a good record, which occasionally we get questions from people far away and other people, and we respond to them. So in any case, I want to welcome you to this house and our corner that history made, and this is the next in our series of presentations.
I'm going to thank the panelists to volunteer your time and be with us and share with us your experience. And let me introduce you to freeholder Angel Estrada. He was the first Latino elected to the freeholder board and has more than 30 years of business and public service experience. He also has been a long-time education advocate, community advocate, and Latino community advocate. He has presided over the expansion of shared counting local services. Also, he has worked closely with the Latino community organization to bring their voices and concerns to the free board. So I'm honored to introduce you to Angel Estrada. He's going to be the moderator.
and at the same time to be very cognizant of the realities that we see today in terms of Hispanics who make a large percentage of our city, and at the same time incorporating them in the process to carry on the historic importance that is in this particular area. I want to thank Kenneth Ward for being here today, and also I know that Michelle Mabini is not here, but she'll be here, I'm sure, and a great commitment where she involves herself to make sure that the new generation is involved in the process for the future. As my wife earlier mentioned, that the history, there's so much history, maybe we should let Mr. Ward do the whole presentation, but that's in another presentation. Today, our issues are very important as to the Hispanic diaspora, which is the acculturation process that takes place in our country, that's the USA, and how we as individuals, when arriving at this country, go through a certain, I consider, not a change, but a movement or an adjustment in life for the differences that we find in terms of society. But let me shut down and basically take this opportunity to recognize our panelists, and we'll start with mine. Like I said, it's now, I'm trying not to read the whole, because these two individuals are individuals, number one, who are committed to the community, number two, who have had a life experience in the arrival to this nation, and at the same time, they have unselfishly given up their time in the process to make sure that other individuals are impacted in a positive sense of what society is all about, how important culture is, and how to make sure that cultures are immersed because of our individual upbringings. Understanding that there are many generations involved, this is something that's very important, I'm sure we'll be talking about. But Maria Cáceres, who works for AT&T Global Technologies in planning, Mara is an engineer from Colombia, passionate about working with the youth to inspire them and believe in themselves and to pursue their dreams and to consider STEM for their future. Mara joined AT&T after obtaining her master's in engineering from Texas A&M in Prairie View. She has a bachelor's of science in electronic engineering from the Universidad Distrital de Bogotá, Colombia. And all around it goes into her whole experience, but she has an impact in terms even of more than a 20-plus years career in telecommunications industry. Her contributions at AT&T include supporting and introducing a wide range of technologies, most recently on virtualization and cloud computing, which are cutting-edge technologies that we hear about today. Not too high-tech, so therefore often challenge in that area, but it's amazing. Prior to working as a network planner, Myra worked at AT&T Labs Research and developed the departments as a technological lead and program manager at Evolution at AT&T Wireless Networks to LTE, the 4G, those I understand, and the VoLTE, and expanding AT&T's optical transport network into Europe and Asia and Pacific. And her knowledge goes on and on, but one of the things that I can truly tell you of her commitment to the coming generation, which is so important. To her left, we find the Honorable Roberto Alcázar. Roberto has been a judge for numerous years. He has a very long, I mentioned to him earlier that he has a very intense area here, but if I can tell you anything besides the fact that his most recent assignment was in the Superior Court, he was in family part and special civil part, which often deal with many of the issues that face our communities today, and always have been an advocate for young people and family. When he was at the Department of Labor, the judge of conversation, he also there spent numerous years. I know his history of very much because in my last 30 years I have known Roberto, and I know that the things through in terms of getting this opportunity to be the first Latino judge in our Superior Court. And no doubt that that brings about a great pride from us, but at the same time, many challenges for him, who's now involved in a system that at times may not necessarily open up doors. So I know that he's a fighter, but as working for the Attorney General's office, he was assigned to many special things that he did. Also his involvements not only with the Hispanic Bar Association, but also at the same time trying to get new attorneys, first students to law school, one, and two, getting people once involved in law school to seek other areas in terms of law. Not everybody wants to make the millions, but being a judge, you don't make millions, all you do is get headaches. But welcome and congratulations. Welcome both of you.
You should know that my claim to fame is that you're a friend of mine.
Thank you. I'm honored by your statement. But anyway, let's get to business. How we're going to do this today is that we want, number one, to start out with, there were some questions that we had discussed earlier during the last few weeks, but I want to surmise by asking this particular combined question, and it's what, and each one of you will have an opportunity to respond. What was your experience coming to the U.S.? Expectation, challenges, and opportunities. Was it the first time, challenge, what was one of the first challenges that you encountered? And how did you navigate the challenges of a new culture, language, and education? Laura, you're first, and then we'll let Roberto, then we'll swap it off so Roberto does not feel that we're sliding in. Thank you.
Buenos días, good morning, thank you for the opportunity. Coming to the U.S., so as Angel mentioned, I got my first degree, my engineering degree back home in Colombia, and I worked for a few years and then decided to pursue a master's degree, and I came to the U.S. So I came to Texas. Finding, the college and application was, I followed my sister's footsteps, so she had come 2 years before, so that part was easy. They just kind of followed her footprints. And I went to Prairie View, Texas A&M. The first challenge, I would say, is the language. So I spoke some English. I had worked at a multinational corporation in Colombia, so I had some exposure to working with technical folks from the U.S. I would go visit and practice my English. So I knew I could communicate. I understood. I could read, especially like technical books. But just talking, speaking, and of course the accent and the pronunciation, and people would go like this. I would say something, and they're like, "What?" And I knew I said the right thing. So I know for folks coming to this country, like we experience that, right? The language, and then you don't want to say anything. And at the end of the day, I'll be like a big headache because of you're thinking too much, you're translating, and you're trying to just keep up. The engineering classes were easy. So the good thing, mathematics, language is universal. So that was the easy part for me. I was pursuing a master's in engineering, but education in Colombia, back home is 5 years of engineering. So compared to the U.S., it was actually my master's classes. The first year were not hard for me. So it was really the social and the language and kind of understanding the dynamics. So that was the first challenge. But I was in college and meeting other Latino students. Prairie View is an international campus. It's really primarily black college, and a lot of international students go there. So it was kind of my first exposure was to many other cultures, many different accents. But I improved my English. I just went through my master's education, and I think that gave me this exposure to a very diverse group of people that I think I first questioned kind of my, racial identity, right? Coming from a very homogeneous place, Colombia, and, that in other countries you don't think of yourself as Hispanic. I mean, you're just who you are, and I thought of myself as white. And then you come to this country and all of a sudden you're labeled something. So it was kind of language and trying to understand that cultural. So those were the first kind of things that I reflected on. I think we'll get more into those, those those topics later, but just going through college, it was just that adaptation to the U.S., to the culture. And then after my master's, I got a job offer at AT&T in New Jersey, so I moved to New Jersey. So that's, about 20 plus years that I moved here and I had my career with AT&T. So I think I'll leave it for that, there for now.
So where we have an opportunity to come back and make some changes or adjustments. If that's it, Roberto, you want to start that?
Well, undoubtedly, the first challenge was communication, as Mayra has very accurately pointed out. I was 16 years of age, and it was in the summertime, so school was off. First thing I needed to learn is what school would I be going to? And we had no one here that we could ask, except as you make a friend, and the family, of course, was equally disadvantaged. So someone said to us, I think there's a high school here by the park, they call it Jefferson. And that is the very beginning, and that is where I went and matriculated myself. Of course, communication continued to be a barrier, and it was so for months and months and months, including years. I came into the junior year high school. Interestingly, I think I should share the story with you because it's both funny and sad. I had left Cuba at the age of 14, almost 15. In the middle of my 10th grade, I lost a year on the trip. I went to Spain. My parents put me on an airplane at the age of 14, kissed me goodbye and said, we hope to see you again. So I went to a refuge home for children. From there, I went to Puerto Rico, where my uncle was residing, who had left Cuba 2 years before, in 1965. For me, it was 67. By the time that I spent a year and a half in Puerto Rico, it would have been now 1968. I did my 10th grade over again, because I didn't have any papers, didn't have anything from Cuba. So the ideal thing would be, well, let's get started again. I didn't lose a year because I had done 5th and 6th grades together. So chronologically, I was even with the school. 10th grade, then having done it over, or starting it over, wasn't really a loss. I brought grades from Puerto Rico. The education there was in Spanish, so I had no problems with it. But when I came here, there was an argument, a discussion that I could not really understand very clearly. And the dispute was, he should go back to 10th grade because he speaks no English. And of course, boy, girl, table, chair. That's as far as I went. So I asked someone who came with me, and I had a bilingual dictionary to complete the application. And I said, what was that again? He says, well, they think you should start 10th grade again because you speak no English. Just the thought of doing 10th grade for the 3rd time was not anything that was palatable. So I said, no, tell them to get me back into kindergarten. Let's start from the beginning because I don't know what this means. I was not only hurt, but I was also offended to the mentality that was so limited that I have to now do 10th grade again because I spoke no English. How about kindergarten? How about 1st grade again, okay? Let's get real about this. So I brought 10 grades. Out of the 10 grades, I had 9 A's and 1 B. So the guidance counselor and the people who were in charge of my future there, who were stepping all over mud over this, said, well, he doesn't present an academic problem. It's only a language barrier. So let's put him on the 11th grade in the college prep courses. That was another brilliant idea. So, of course, my teacher would say to me, well, where's your essay? I wasn't sure I was understanding. People are talking to you in a foreign language. You don't understand what they're saying to you. Of course, that was an insurmountable barrier. We got through that one, by the way, and not easy. But communication was the most difficult thing, and continued to be so for many more years. It's a lot less now, but it was rather insurmountable. So I yield.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I could just picture that that event. Must have been something a certain degree, but you have to understand how things happen. Now, the next question that we will like to tackle is, which was the breaking point that marked your success? Which was the opportunity that gave you the extra push that you, for your new life? What do you think it takes to navigate in the U.S. culture? Now, I want to ask to make sure that you bring it back to culture, because we are all, we have come from different countries. Not that our culture is made too far differently, but I think it's important to also, bring it in with culture. Thank you very much.
Okay, so education, I think, is the first thing that opens doors and definitely just, send us, allow us to move forward and we advance. So I got my master's degree, so definitely that opened the door for, interviewing and getting the job at AT&T. But I think what really helped me was that I got involved with the Latino Hispanic Association of AT&T employees. So I had gone to a career fair that happened in Houston that happened to have, kind of Hispanic focus, and then at the booth of the different company, there was somebody that was Latino. So I met, and I think that contributed to them inviting me for an interview. So when I started with AT&T, I connected with that group. So then I got a new family, because we are that way, right? We know somebody Colombian and from our, or Latin American, and we feel connected. So I started to just be involved with that. It's like a club, like a extracurricular activity, and doing activities and Hispanic Heritage Month celebrations and so on. So I met other people just doing activities, right? And I think that's what I tell the youth as I speak to them, right? Get involved with the clubs and do extracurricular activities, and you have that extended group of people besides whatever your primary activity, right? Besides your school, it might get besides my work. The people that help me navigate, the new city and the new culture and the work environment were my friends from the Latino organization. At that time was HISPA, or the name of that organization. And my best friends at AT&T are from that group, throughout the years, that we continue to do things. We don't work in the same group. First, like just the Latino, the group at my building where I work, New Jersey, that's a national organization. Corporations have these groups. We had national conferences, so I started to go places just being part of that group. And through a lot of the activities that we normally do is community outreach and employee development. So all these talks about leadership, but also about culture. So I remember over the years, we had these multicultural communications, right? I went to workshops like that. And over time, I gave the workshop to say, our culture, how is it different than the American culture or European or Asian? Like how our, Latinos, time is flexible, right? We're late. We need to acknowledge our culture, but it's how that culture is versus very, the meaning of time and how we value it here is very different than Colombia or Latin America. And learning those things helped me navigate my workplace. Things like, to show respect, right? In our culture, you don't look at, looking at your parents, at the eyes is kind of defiant. In this culture, you don't look at your boss, directly, face to face, the eye contact, you're insecure. And we need to understand those things, and it's not to give up our culture, but to really know how to navigate and how we need to adapt and sometimes change. So all those experiences through the Hispanic group that I developed a lot of the, professionally. Thank you to that involvement that, gave me those tools to, continue advancing and moving, knowing how to navigate the workplace.
Thank you.
Elizabeth was a very different city than it is today. When I came to Elizabeth in 1968, there weren't as many Hispanics. The community was much smaller. I can tell you that we didn't have the opportunities that Myra speaks about. I was not a professional, I was a student, I was a 16-year-old. Not an easy beginning in that regard. There were places in Elizabeth that would not rent me an apartment. in 1968. We don't rent the space. That's what I hear. I didn't feel alone because one of the judges I sat with, who happened to be an African American, said the same thing to me. I couldn't rent an apartment here in Elizabeth. So we share that experience. It is very different today, completely different. So from a cultural point of view, we were sort of forming up the community that you see now. We were sort of the bricks that got on the basement. And might have had a different experience, much more comfortable one, I would think, than I did. I share with a few boys. I was in high school. It was old boys high school at that time, and old girls would be the back. So I share with them, and you know, we had our camaraderie, and then they had different goals, and some of them became professionals, some of them did not, and others have passed away. But my experience here in Elizabeth was very different than the Hispanics and now currently or contemporaneously will confront. Okay?
Okay, let me just put in some information here. The median age in the city of Elizabeth presently is 33.9 years of age, with a population of about 130,215 on the 2017 adjustment to the 2010 census. It says that actually 46% of the residents of Elizabeth are foreign born, which actually brings about a whole different flavor how culture would work in a place like Elizabeth. And that's something that is extremely interesting. Let me go to the next one. Based on your experience now, what would you do differently? Which choices would you have preferred to have changed? And what is the importance of having growing Hispanic representation in each of your fields? Now, let me just reverse it. Let me start with Roberto, give him a chance to be first, and then Mario will continue. Thank you.
Well, that was a relief because, you know, her footsteps are very hard to follow. We're talking about the breaking points in here?
Yes.
There were many. What would I do different? The truth is nothing. Because the idea is not necessarily to do something different, but maybe you could do something better. Different doesn't always carry you into a better direction. It was all fine. I have no regrets. And if I were to make a comment, what Paul Anka wrote for Frank Sinatra, regrets, I had a few, but then again, too few to mention. All has been well. I have no regrets to speak of. It has been a great life. Hasn't been an easy life. It was a difficult life, but it was a great life. And for that, I'm grateful.
Myra?
Well, I'm glad you went first because I was going to say, well, I didn't change anything. I think I am very blessed with all the opportunities that I had. And as you mentioned, there are challenges along the way, but I think my path has been easier in a way because of, you know, where I was. So talking about like Elizabeth, how multicultural and I guess international community is. I went to work at AT&T at Bell Laboratories, and where people were hired by their talent. So it's a very international community. A lot of Asians, a lot of Chinese. I mean, the brightest and smartest people from all over the place would be hired by Bell Labs. So it is very diverse, which it meant it was very inclusive. Really, people were respected by who they were. But as I traveled with, you know, the Hispanic Association, we went to our national conferences and we went to different places. It was not the same everywhere. So I could see how I was like in this bubble of a very, you know, supportive community where differences were celebrated as opposed to, you know, like I didn't feel discriminated. But I could get exposure and hear the stories of how our immigration and our culture affected people in a very different way. So I also noticed I was very blessed because even though I'm Hispanic, I'm fair complexion, so I look very white, which is not the case of many Latinos. So many people would ask me, Emily, where are you from? And they, you know, think I'm Eastern European. And I know that they treat me different. So I didn't feel like discrimination for being Latina. Because we're judged by how we look or how we sound. right? So I didn't have that experience. So I feel very blessed with all my experiences. I don't think I'll change anything. I've learned, and I just feel like, sharing experiences and giving back is kind of the way to, acknowledge my blessings and hopefully, sharing stories so people, can learn from that experience and do better.
Well, at this time, I think as the moderator, I have a little leadway that I can actually input some of my own personal ideas, because I think it's important to recognize that this nation is it's a very important place that allows individuals to come in and help shape what culture is here, is made up in this country. And no doubt that we have been giving opportunities that possibly in many places you wouldn't get. So I am one of those who consistently, truly believes that this is probably the best nation of the world for many reasons, including giving people the opportunities to come and make themselves part of this nation, which is so important. And to continue, what is important to you to give back to the entire community? How can this be transformed to a local, regional, or national ethos? Given the current climate, what can we do to help the entire community? Aya?
I think giving back is really important. And as I said before, we just need to pay it forward and help the people that are coming after us. I haven't mentioned, my husband is Chinese American. So he was born in New Jersey, but his parents are Chinese. And through him, I've been able to also learn of other immigration stories and to realize that, all immigration waves share this very similar challenges. Of course, the personal experience is unique, but there are some similarities, right? So to be more aware that it's not just the Latinos, in this time, day and age, but others have gone through very similar difficulties. But then we all have to give back, and we focus in, our community that we relate to, or that, like I go back to the schools as part of the HISPA role model program, and I come to Elizabeth. So my connection here, my Colombian, community and the restaurants and the food, and then I just use that connection to, come and speak to students in Elizabeth, because there's a lot of Colombians, when they hear somebody, just share my story and say, hopefully they see that they can also become engineers or scientists or, have a professional career, right? So, when I give back, it's in my, the community that I connect to. But I think it's in thinking of giving back to anybody that is in need and just supporting, like the youth that are the future of our country. So we just need to be very, very aware that if we don't help them develop and be successful, this country will not be successful. So I think that's why we all need to just give back and share from our blessings.
I think it is appropriate to second the comments of Freeholder Estrada regarding what this country is about. This is the greatest country in the world. I have lived in other places and visited many others. But this is, and I'm repeating, the greatest country in the world. And we have to make sure we keep it that way. This is a country that does not ask you where you come from, but is only concerned with where you're going. And it opens the arms to you and it gives you the opportunities that we didn't have in our country. I was raised under communism, so I know what it is like not to have opportunity. And even Mayra, who was not raised under communism, comes here because it offers her great opportunities. And she'd rather stay here than go back to where she came from. And Colombia is a great country, but the United States of America is unique.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you. I think it's now the time where we are actually going to ensure that a little more about culture. As you know, that this nation has a culture that it has been built up over many, many years. There's no doubt that we arrive in this country with different, to a certain degree, cultures of things participants in a nation that may be a little different. For example, just the other day I was in an event. I remember as a kid, we don't clap in Cuba. We didn't clap after the national anthem. It was kind of a sign of disrespectful. But I came to this country where you find that after the Star Spangled Banner is sung, everybody, yells and applauds and everything else. So there are different cultural things that are allowed in countries at different times. But when it comes to us, as in our particular cases as Hispanics, and the fact that we have immigrated to this country, what can we expect of the next generation? What is the commitment that we make in terms of a community to continue this cultural trend in this country? What do you think in your particular cases?
As we come from, immigrate from another country, we go through this process of balancing, holding on to our culture, our background, and adapting to the new country, right? And it's very important to learn how things work here and how to, you need to modify your behavior to be successful in some cases, right? Without losing your identity. But it's like an ongoing dance, right? Because we want to, really not forget our roots. But as our, communities are more mixed, so I said my husband is Chinese American, so my daughter is, she'll say 100% American, but she's, half Colombian, half Chinese. There are things that I think are more superficial, like your foods are very different, and maybe how you dress or the music. Deep inside, the values are very similar, so our cultures, respect for the elders and the value of education and the value of family is very important. So, but then she's very American. She's very independent. I mean, she grew up here and went through the school system, right? So the culture keeps evolving, right? So we somehow need to highlight our values and not lose what is really important, right? Our family and our respect for others, and continue to build that up. But it will evolve, and we take from all the other groups that are, right, that we interact with, and it's more of a mixing pot.
And how does language play a role in that? Because in your particular case, it's very interesting. You have now a gentleman who's of Chinese origin, who speaks Chinese, I'm sure, even though he's second generation, and you speak Spanish as well as English, and so does he. How does your children come into the picture? I mean, are we saying that it's important for them to maintain the culture and language that they previously had? Or how do you do that? How do you play that part of it? Because I'm sure every family is different.
I believe it's important to cultivate the ethnic background of the parents, right? So we spoke Spanish to my daughter when she was, as a baby. My husband actually speaks just a little Chinese, so not enough to really instill that on her. So she learned Spanish. We tried sending her to Chinese school for a few years, like kindergarten and so on, but it was too challenging, and then eventually she gave that up. So she speaks Spanish, but not Chinese. She just had a little bit of, few words. I fell on the music. She does not dance, but my husband is a great dancer. But it's trying to cultivate that. But in terms of language, what I see is her English is excellent. She went to school and she speaks, she still corrects me, and I'm still learning English. I think it never ends. But I am very Latina in my speaking and the context, and we talk too much, right? And we have to provide all these details. She's very American, and she's very few words. She'll say the minimum. I ask this long question, and then she, in text, she'll give me one word answer. And, so you get, I don't know what you get. it's a mix, right? But I think cultivating, just keeping those values and those, cultural aspects are important, just so they remember, right, where they come from.
I hear Chinese American. Here we are Hispanic American. I hear of Italian American and Greek American. I begin to see a common denominator, Americans. We're all Americans in this country. When I wanted to quit high school because it was too much of a challenge, my my parents said to me, look, you gotta make the effort because you would always do a little better than we have done here, and you will probably not be a factory worker like we are, because you will have an opportunity to be much more fluent in the language than we would ever become. And the elderly, there was no need for them to train themselves because they had access to the Spanish TV, to the radio, to the supermarket. They even get a ride back after they buy the groceries. So my mother lived in a Spanish world, and my father. But their advice was, you're really going to be living in an English world. And it is critical for you to continue in school and get an education. Of course, they knew that education was an engine for success. And they were not wrong about that. And I knew that they were not wrong about that. But of course, I was the one who had my fingers in the grinding machine. So I was all feeling the pain. But we had to go on, and we had to move on. And yes, there was a time in history when immigrants came to this country and they wanted to assimilate. They didn't necessarily want to walk on the street, they wanted to walk on the sidewalk. And so we're not permitted to do that by the other ethnic groups that were here. Because there was a tendency to be sectional and to group. But I can tell you that the greater presence creates a certain amount of power. And the power is a political one. And since this is a democracy, a representative democracy, people who can vote would have a voice. So the Hispanic community in areas such as this one here has a presence. And the presence allows certain privileges that did not exist if you didn't have the smaller group. But her daughter is going to be trained in the ways of America. If you want to be successful in this country, you have to accept the fact that we are minorities and that there is a greater group. That if we're going to make that crossover, it's critical that we're able to understand the culture, to participate in the culture. Critically, the language is what unites a group of people. Look at the problems that Europe confronts. There's so many different cultures, there's so many different countries, there's so many different languages. The European Union, in my opinion, is a pipe dream. It's a pie in the sky. But here, we have somewhat maintained the, I wouldn't say the illusion, but the concept that, of course, we still are one nation, under one language that is official, and although there are pockets here and there of different groups, the children, her children, myself, if I really wanted it to do what I had to do, I had to buy into the program. I had to basically adopt the program as it adopted me.
Well, realistically, we know that every single young person in our community that is a Hispanic community is not college bound. We know that we have a lot of work to do in the area of ensuring that the assimilation process will change the way that they will find themselves like we did in terms of our education. What do we need to do in your perspectives as to improve the numbers of young people going for greater education? Understanding that society needs of all types, but what can we do to really improve the number? Because we still have, I had some more statistics, but there is a great need to ensure that, yes, the language is going to be critical, but education is as well as critical. So that will make that next question, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. Thank you.
Did you ask? I wasn't sure if you were directing. Well, the idea is not to remain insular. Education, of course, as I said, in my opinion, is the engine for progress. And that is one way. But education takes different forms. For example, you don't need to be a professional. You could be what we know as a blue-collar worker. This country is great because it opens those opportunities to the different groups. You don't need, this is not a country that is based on the color of your blood, blue or red. This is a country that's based on your ability and on your desire to work and to make progress. We know that people who fix air conditionings and heating systems do very well because we need that service. And yet, professions are under attack today. Doctors are going to be paid $7 or $10 or $15 for a visit when they walk out of medical school with $1 million debt, and it's impossible to pay that. So we can see that the greatness of the nation is that it doesn't really, in this aspect, pigeonholes you to a level of poverty or level of income. This is a country that opens the doors to you. This is a country that is not perfect, but better than any other civilized nation in this world, struggles with honesty to right its wrongs. We have known that throughout history. We can see that the changes that we have had that were apparent revolutionary, when that's so revolutionary, they were preservatives. Those movements like the New Deal, the Emancipation Proclamation, the Great Society, these were movements that were created to preserve the nation, not to revolutionize the nation. Our revolutionary spirit was left out in the 1700s. Ken has a little chuckle because he knows what I'm talking about, and he knows that is, he could curse without thought.
Yeah, yes.
You know? So what we do here is preserve the nation, and we will do anything that we can to preserve the nation. But I would encourage anyone to do what they want to do, because if they do it well, they are sure of living. The country here is so open and so magnificent. And yet, you know, open up your eyes, see where the pathway will lead you. If you went to a guidance, if you went to an employment counselor today, and you said, well, I want to go to law school, they'll tell you, don't do it. In fact, don't even consider that for the next 20 years. So you could see that yourself, that it is not a path to follow. And I'm talking about regionally. The country is so big. This country is nearly unmanageable, such a large piece of real estate, and so many different people, and so many different takes and outlooks. So, for example, if you want to do some work today and learn how to fix a car or become an auto mechanic, which is now away from the hands of many people who used to do this kind of work 15 years ago, because technology has really kept them out of the new car. Go ahead and do that. These are decent wages that would allow you to put food on the table and raise a family. That is my view too, by the way. Anyone who comes to this country from afar, from a wagon, and has, as I did, a language barrier and a culture shock, and is able to raise a family, and is able to put food on the table in an honest way, to me, that is a success story. Anything beyond that is gravy. Good for you. But if you can do that much, you have succeeded.
Thank you.
So I fully agree with your statement about not everybody's college bound, right? Education is very important. So the fact that our jobs, even though we still need all these trade work jobs, the level of basic education that people need to even do those jobs, you know, because technology has advanced so much and everybody is computerized, and, you know, then they need to finish high school. They need, you know, the minimum level is higher than what it used to be before. So we do need to encourage our students to finish. They need to find what their passion is. And if it is in the, you know, for more professional degrees, to definitely go to college and not let any barriers, any, you know, like money or anything to stop them. For that, I think we need to be present in their lives. And, you know, as I volunteer, you know, to go speak to the schools and, you know, where are more Latinos, is to give those examples. It would be great if the media would show those examples, right? And, or in the political arena, right? We need to have, you know, successful Latinos as public images so the kids could see that I can be successful. Because there are pockets and there are places where they don't see that, right? So they don't have those examples, so they think they have to stay as a blue-collar worker. And they could do more, but they just, if they haven't seen that, they could be there, get there, then they will not even pursue it. Or if their parents are so busy working 3 jobs that they cannot really give them the tools to, you know, to show them that path. So I think we need to just be there for them and, you know, show the examples so they can aspire to, you know, get better opportunities. And I think education opens the doors for that, right? But as you said, I mean, we still need trade, you know, jobs. I mean, those service jobs, we'll always need them. But we also have cases in this country where, you know, like in the less populated areas, you know, we all have the country where there are no doctors, right? That there are a lot of like programs and even like full scholarships to say, if you want to be a doctor in one of those like very remote areas, you know, they'll pay for your education because nobody want to be there, right? Everybody want to be in the cities. So there's a huge range of options. So yes, if you wanna work and you know, work hard, this country will give you those opportunities, right? But we need education and determination and working hard.
Well, we're getting close to the end, but I do want to see if, be more than glad to take at least one question from the audience, if anybody has any questions about the things that have been heard today. Fran?
I teach a group of Spanish-speaking women too, write English, but we do a lot of language too. And here in Elizabeth, 65% of Elizabeth is Latino, Hispanic. And there are whole neighborhoods where my students come from, where no one speaks English. So the opportunity to learn English, and I agree, that's a big barrier. One of my students is in her mid-80s from Colombia, and she said, in order to learn English, you need an American friend. But so many of them are hesitant to speak to non-Spanish speaking people because Americans are not patient. And they won't, they won't with somebody who's struggling with language. I don't know, and I know with my own students, when they get very frustrated, they'll say, well, you're Spanish? And they will laugh because I understand that it's difficult to learn another language, but native English speakers don't understand that, and they aren't patient. And I think it's a sad indictment, I think, on American culture that we're not having more of an outreach to them. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe you have a solution. I don't,
If I may,
yeah.
I get it. This is a capitalist country, so money is important. The Hispanic National Chamber of Commerce handles billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's a powerful organization. There's a lot of business here.
It's the most successful chamber in the state.
Okay, there you go. And nationwide too, in the areas where there's a Spanish community, they do very well. In some way, that is a disservice to people who adhere to the culture and basically resist a transition into the English world. My parents were elderly. The younger people, they have TV in Spanish, radio in Spanish. They do anything. They have a world in Spanish. They live in a bubble.
Yeah.
Okay, but they stay in that bubble unless they break through and get into the culture of the country, the language, and itself, understanding what this country is all about. Okay, so in a way, we do a disservice when we have such a comfortable arrangement to people who are not yet in a position to make that transition. That doesn't mean they won't survive. They're doing very well, in fact. And you can be a salesman for Goya products, and if you just visit Spanish markets, you will make a living. Your commissions will be enough to be able to do that, so long as you do your work. So it's not that there is not going to be success in that, but there will be. But in a way, we do a disservice when we make this so simple and so easy for people to continue in that environment, in that part of the world, and to that extent, perhaps they're living.
Yeah, so what you said, get a friend, right? So I jokingly, I'll say when people ask me how to, learn the language, you're like, get a boyfriend, girlfriend, right? That only speaks English, because you will, spend so much time and you're talking about everything that you will learn the language. So, if they can, get friends, right? That to speak English only. But the other comment, and I think we need to remind people, is just, it is very uncomfortable, right? We don't want people to laugh at us and they're not patient, but think of an American person going to one of our countries and they'll speak 3 words in Spanish and they'll say, oh, I speak Spanish, right? So our attitude is, unless we speak very well, 80% or more English, then we say, oh, I don't speak English, right? But they could, maybe they speak enough, they just, it's very, it's embarrassing. But it's kind of to think of that American attitude, an American tourist in a Spanish-speaking country, they'll say, oh, hablo español, and they speak 4 words. But they'll kind of say that. So we need to just tell them, just shift your attitude. It's not easy, but it's really you just have to speak, and people laugh at you and just deal with it. Yes, but unless we do it, right? Unless we keep talking and practicing, we won't get past it.
Okay. I was surprised by your comment about eye contact. It never dawned on me that I know some other cultures where that is more obvious. I never thought to think that that was an issue with you at all. But apparently it is.
It could be.
question, but I have a statement. So
Statement, okay.
yes, I'm a Spanish teacher, and I've been a Spanish teacher in the District of Elizabeth for 20 years now. And I've seen that throughout the years. What I see is that a lot of our Hispanic students are encouraged not to speak the language. And, I see that, unfortunately, I have a lot of Spanish students that are not speaking the language because the parents are not encouraging them to, because either they want them to lose the accent or, whatever situations they have at home. So it's just unfortunate that some of our kids are losing, the culture and the language. So, what suggestions or, what would you say to that, and to that effect?
And I think it's a risk, right? And the parents, I know they want the best for their kids. And as you said, previous generation, other immigration, groups wanted to assimilate, right? I mean, it was better for them to really look and American and don't stand out, right? So there are the past generations that definitely kind of lost the language. Now it's more accepted. I think it's reminding how powerful to be bilingual is. It is an economic differentiator. But the parents are afraid. The parents want their kids to be successful and to really learn the English and be good at that. So that balance is kind of reminding the students and maybe the parents that Spanish is a very powerful tool. But they need to do both. They need to be excellent in English because it's an English-speaking country. I mean, we need to just accept it, and we need to understand the culture and really be very proficient at it.
The suggestion is educate the parents.
Yes.
Okay. I think that, oh, I'm sorry.
It's for
Mayra?
Mayra, okay. So what made you, how did you decide to move here? Wasn't even your family hard in Colombia?
My parents were very, always encouraged. First, education was the top priority, education. They gave us college education. But my dad always encouraged us to travel and see the world. He always said, salgan de estas cuatro paredes. You get out of these four walls and see the world and see things are different and just, open your eyes that things are not just right one way. The fact that we do things one way here doesn't mean it's the right way or the only way. So as you travel, then you open up your opportunities. So when it was time for me to get a master's, I said, I don't want to just go back to my same college, same professors, and I'll go somewhere else in the U.S. It's the greatest country. So I had that opportunity. I had extended family here to then get my master's, but also then get all this other knowledge and experiences, right, like a different culture, and blessed to get a job and stay.
Okay, I think the next part here is Sebastian Prado for comments.
So good afternoon, everyone. As I'm just mentioned, my name is Sebastian Prado. I am a trustee of the Historical Society, and on behalf of the board of the Historical Society, the staff and volunteers of the Historical Society, we want to thank you for coming to our forum. We want to thank the panelists for giving your time and thoughts to the audience, and most importantly, we want to thank all of you for coming here and for opening to hear their thoughts. We want to ask you to continue this conversation outside this space because it's something that we need in this community. Thank you and have a good day.